Hey everybody, I'm Josh Golding here with my friend Tyler Smith, and we are going to talk once again about classic sci-fi television, TV shows that were high watermarks, both in TV but specifically in sci-fi. And today we're going to be talking about that excellent series, The X-Files, that ran on Fox and in syndication from 1993 till about 2002.
Which I consider to be the last really good sci-fi TV show. And the thing is you say Fringe, and I'm like, Fringe is on the fringe of being good. I don't think X-Files. It's survived.
There could have been no.
It's past a decade. The general rule is, are people still talking about it after a decade?
We'll put it this way: that there could have been no Fringe without X-Files. I mean, that show paved the way for all the look-alike shows.
Exactly. I mean, and that's another reason why the X-Files is a powerhouse show, because you see all these rip-offs of it that just aren't near as good, in my opinion. Now I haven't seen Fringe. I stopped watching sci-fi television after the X-Files, because every time I watched something, I was just so disappointed. I just gave up.
I agree.
But I'm going to throw down the gauntlet here. I'm going to throw down the gauntlet and say definitively that the X-Files was the last good sci-fi TV show, and I'm putting out the challenge out there for someone to pick up the gauntlet and run with it and say, we're going to do another good sci-fi TV show.
You really wish they would.
Yeah, you agree with me on that.
Or things like, I don't know, story, writing, character development, they actually seem to matter.
One of the things I noticed about The Twilight Zone and The X-Files is the things that they had in common. Passion, heart, having something to say. And a great amount of love and care and craft in putting these things together. Mm-hmm. You can see when the people who made The Twilight Zone, even The Outer Limits, they were passionate about what they were doing, and that carried at every level: the writing, the directing, the acting, the editing, the lighting, the cinematography, the look, the feel, all the way through. And I just don't see that care on any level, of the new sci-fi shows that came out. Let me give you an example, okay? Enterprise. Mm-hmm. I watched that. I was like, oh my God, who's lighting this? The lighting and the cinematography were so bad. I felt like puking. I mean, it's like I had to stop watching it because.
Well, with Enterprise, I mean, you might argue the main problem there was casting, I think.
No, I think the main problem was nobody cared. Yeah. It was just there to make money. And no one cared about putting it together.
It's about branding. We're going to slap the Star Trek symbols on it and hope that it approximates.
Yeah, and we, it's like George Lucas. It's like, we'll just call it Star Wars, throw in a couple lightsabers, a few spaceships, a few laser battles, and hey, we got $1 billion. We know it's going to work.
Ultimately, all that matters is
the
toys that are going to be marketed later. That's all he cares about. So that's why. Yeah. I agree. X-Files, watching it used to be sort of an event. I mean, I don't even think about TV in the same way anymore. There's no shows that are like a destination that I'm actually all week looking forward to.
Well, you're like hungry for the next episode next week, I
mean, the only comparable ones would have been right around the same time. It was probably Star Trek: The Next Generation. That was the other show that we would tune in, sci-fi show we would tune in week after week religiously to watch. But even then, only about the first 3 or 4 seasons of both of those shows. I know there's very few people that would think about, when they talk about X-Files, would they say that the latter half of the 9 seasons are their favorite or anything like that.
As a joke.
I just love it.
And I got some swampland I want to sell you.
As long as Agent Doggett is in it, it's a good episode.
I'll stay up till midnight to watch that.
But the show, it's great thinking back on it. I just have all these sort of warm, fuzzy memories of it. It's like when it first came out, I was in high school, and the show was of interest to both me and my parents. So it was like had this intergenerational pull where people of different ages would sort of be sitting down together to watch this thing, and each episode was like a mini movie. The production values were so high for TV, and like we were talking about. At the time, it basically helped launch the mini when Fox was still a baby. When the network
Well,
Fox.
I think that's one of the reasons why the show was a hit, because you look at the history of when this show came out. Fox was the new kid on the block. There was ABC, NBC, and CBS, and Fox was trying to squeeze into their market share, and because of that, they were lean and hungry. They were willing to take risks. They were willing to take big risks and a lot of risks. And they took a risk. They said, okay, this Chris Carter guy, he's got something that sounds interesting. You know,
I heard they made him. They said no originally. He wasn't quite there, but he did do a re-pitch. He reworked it and came back.
But the thing was, there were several elements that came together quite well. And let's talk about some of the, what were some of the influences, Chris Carter's influences of the X-Files, John?
Well, just reading up on the X-Files background, you know, we learned that Chris Carter was a native of California, that he spent some time with Walt Disney Pictures, and then sort of coming off the heels of disillusionment of what he couldn't do with Disney, he was really looking for to tell some dark stories, some serious stories, and you know, his background was that of the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal. You know, movies like 3 Days of the Condor, those kind of things.
All the President's Men.
All the President's Men were very much in people's minds those times. Things about secret agents. And conspiracies.
You have to remember something. Deep Throat.
Deep Throat
was the name of a person in the real life Watergate scandal who was leaking information to Woodward and Bernstein, the two reporters who broke that story. So they have their own Deep Throat in there. You know, and there's a cigarette smoking man in there who represents like the corruption of the government. You know, it's just this kind of.
He also ends up being. Later, they equivocate him with the man on the grassy knoll. So he's the trigger man. You know, he's the one that's behind the scenes. Represents the secret government that we didn't vote for.
That's really running things, not the one that we see up there we voted for.
And they did, you know, they do takes on Majestic 12. So all these sort of myths, urban myths about secret governments and black lodges and secret societies. Those are very much informed, but also. The TV show, Kolchak the Night Stalker.
A huge influence.
Huge influence.
But its influence was actually the short stories of Edgar Allan Poe, who popularized the style of the dark short story. You know, where you have a story that's dark, that has dark themes in it, and there's no happy answer at the end. You know, there's no they lived happily ever after. No. Poe was saying life is hard, it is brutal, it is unfair, and you just have to deal with it.
The template there is, the reason it translates so well is we start off with a dark, kind of a moody mystery, and as you peel away the layers of the onion, you find that the answers that you have only lead to more questions, and that
and there are no easy answers.
Right, and they're from the occult, or the supernatural informs these answers, and oftentimes, as in the case of the X-Files, there wouldn't be a resolution. You'd still be left with an open-ended where maybe it was some of one way, but maybe it was some of the other, and you had the two figures of Mulder and Scully as both the believer and the skeptic kind of playing against each other.
But I think there's a couple reasons why they have to do that, and I think one is because, you know, I wanted to talk about this idea, the whole idea of the people in power versus the masses. So the people in power will make a show. It's like when I was a kid, I was watching The Little Rascals, and in the show, they were making fun of and condemning the rich people and the people in power. And I said, I like watching that because I'm poor. My dad explained to me, but it's the rich people that are making the show. How hypocritical is this? You know, they're doing it to milk you, to make money off of you. You know, and it's the same dynamic that you have between the people in power and the people under them. And I believe Chris Carter was genuinely sincere in challenging the system. But the money men will look for a guy like him and say, okay, we're going to let him run with a show like this, and we're going to milk it for some big bucks. Even though they're completely disingenuous about wanting to change the status quo.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So there's an interesting dynamic there, and you see this played out in the show, and that makes it interesting. Another reason this show worked is because to have really good drama, you need some subtext. You need some things, tension under the surface of what's going on.
Right.
And David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson, these two actors, they really didn't like each other.
I had heard that. You heard stories about
I really don't.
behind the scenes, just sort of coolness and just kind of standing offish from each other.
They really, but that gives attention to their scenes. That really works on camera.
He sort of thought he was a movie star, and I think he sort of treated her like an outsider a little bit.
Yeah, they really didn't like each other. They really didn't hit it off. You know, it's interesting. If you ever watch Combat, you remember that old show with Vic Morrow?
Yeah.
There's a scene where the actor who plays Little John and the guy from The Incredible Hulk, Bill Bixby, they were in an episode together, and they play two men who really hate each other, who are about ready to fight each other, And the actor who played Little John admitted he came really close to kicking Bill Bixby's ass when they were shooting that, and that's what his character was going through in the scene.
Right.
He's just on the verge of just clobbering him.
So you think the personal tensions on the set actually informed the?
I think it added
show,
a dynamic to the show that kept it lively and exciting and interesting.
And it kind of read as sexual tension, I guess, but
it was actually dislike and disdain in real life. They actually asked writers who were looking at writing X-File movies, could you do it so we don't spend much time together even? I actually put out the word on that,
That often happens, so you get them in episodes or movies where they're spending a lot of time on the phone to
each other.
Hi Mulder, I'm not here this episode, but I'm phoning my part in so that I can appear to still be interacting with you.
But the thing is one of the things that worked on the show, and Chris Carter was right to do this, he said, I wanted to use the theme of UFOs, but I couldn't do that every episode, every week. So he decided to make a scary show. And the thing is, people like to be scared in a safe environment. They like to have that adrenaline rush of fear, a sensation of being alive, without really truly being in danger.
Sure.
You see what I'm saying? And the X-Files provided that week after week.
Yeah.
There was like some boogeyman, like the Parasite Man,
often there was a creature, right?
Yeah, a creature that they had to deal with, or there was some villain, or some mystery that needed to be solved. But there was some tension of danger.
It was a unique show too, if I can just interject, because it had it both ways, and it would win on both counts. Like it was the serial, in which the canon episodes, which was about, they would touch on them a few per season. You would have these canon episodes, which would be sort of the main plot of the X-Files that dealt with the UFO conspiracy, what happened to Mulder's family, and possible abduction of his sister. And they would touch on these like little gems throughout the seasons. You'd go back to these canon episodes. Outside of those ones, you had everything else that was the X-Files, and those were all really excellent as well. But in those, they largely wouldn't do aliens. They'd do some other things, some kind of a creature, or genetic manipulations, or they had psychic powers that they were exploring.
Oh yeah, that was one of the wonderful things about the show. There were just so many things that they could go after, and they did pick good episodes. They did pick good ideas. I would like to talk about two of their early episodes that were really quite good.
Yes.
Let's start talking about some of the shows. Ice. I think that was, most people agree, that was their first good episode where they were starting to get on a roll. And their inspiration for that was The Thing. Howard Hawks' The Thing.
Okay.
And it takes place up in Alaska, and it's a similar type of scenario where they're in an isolated place up in Alaska, and they're dealing with a dangerous alien species.
So locked in a frozen wasteland.
Yeah.
In a science facility. In which, there's some sort of parasite
that's driving people crazy and causing them to kill everyone.
And the cool thing about those setups is you never know whom to trust, and if people start acting suspicious.
And even your own mother might be corrupted by the parasite. It's like there's no one you can trust at that point. That's what made it so interesting, where they actually pull their guns on each other and considering shooting.
Doesn't it end up one of them locks the other in the meat locker?
Yeah, it's Mulder who gets locked in the meat locker. But then they realize that he's not the infected one, and that it was one of the other casts in there. But the thing is there are real issues in that episode. If you found like a parasite from outer space like this, that's very dangerous. Should you take it out and risk examining it, risk it getting loose? Or should you just torch the entire facility, you know, without risk, you know, and in the end, they decided to torch the facility, you know, for the safety of the public. And those aren't easy calls to make, but this is the sort of thing, this is what good writing and good storytelling is, to where we can sit around afterwards debating the decisions that they made. You know, it's like what the difference between Spielberg and Kubrick, Terry Gilliam said. Spielberg gives you answers. Kubrick gives you questions. Right. And then we debate how we answer the questions. You know, whereas if we have the answers, then there's no debate.
So the audience is drawn in and they're invested in the story because they're taking a more active role of unraveling the mystery and putting the pieces together.
Well, one of the things that worked about the X-Files was the show gave people a false sense of empowerment, I really felt. Now, we will watch, you know, the crises in the Middle East. We'll watch the corruption going on in our government. You know, all these various problems that are going on. And what do we do about any of this? Most of us, nothing. You know, unless you're like someone like David Gilbert, a member of the Weathermen, who decides, okay, the government's corrupt. I'm going to rob a bank to raise money to overthrow the government. Yeah. You know, and Gilbert ended up getting sentenced to 75 years to life in New York State prison. You know, but most of us won't do that. You see what I'm saying? Most of us are like, okay, I got a job, I got bills to pay, I got to focus on that. You know that. So we feel a sense of impotency as a public. But by watching Mulder and Scully, you know, fighting Big Brother, fighting the system, we get a sense of empowerment through them. You see what I'm saying? And not only that, even if it's a false sense of empowerment, we at least feel it, you know? Right. And the thing is as they dig towards the truth, we feel we're actually getting closer to the truth, but we still have the same problem. The money men who control and run everything are the ones who have the final say in the scripts. So they're never going to let us get to the truth. It's funny because...
That happens in their stories, too, where they'll reach a certain plateau, and then someone from on high will tell them, well, guys, we need you to not look any further in this direction. And that's sort of, sometimes that's the
that
end.
Does happen, or reverse what they said was true earlier, to just keep you guessing all the way through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an interesting dynamic of it. But the thing is also there's the endless debate, you know, going back even to Socrates. You know, what is the truth? You know? It's like Socrates, he tried to get his fellow Athenians to find the truth, and they were so happy about that, they killed him. He's like, what was I thinking? People spend their whole life trying to avoid the truth. They don't want me reminding them where it is.
But the truth is out there.
Yeah, it's out there. But it's like what my father used to say to me as a kid. He said to me, son, I don't have a problem with the truth. I don't bother it, and it doesn't bother me. I do what I want, and it does what it wants.
But also in the show, truth is a huge theme, obviously, and then the other theme, I think, is belief.
Yeah.
As seen by Mulder's poster, and he's been marginalized in the bureau. He's been put in the basement as Spooky Mulder, and he's down there with his cinder block walls, and he's got the poster that says, I want to believe, and that's also a big theme.
Yeah, that is a big theme, and it does work. It gets us to root for him as a person. Another thing I liked about the show is the fact that Mulder, the guy's really kind of a flawed hero. You know, he's really kind of a loser. He's really kind of a screw up. You know, he even describes himself as a nuisance to his superiors and a joke to his peers. You know, and I think
he's an unmarried, apartment living.
He's almost never solved any of the cases he's been involved.
He's a pistachio chewing, pornography loving bachelor who is forever in an apartment.
The quiet, angry loner.
And then on the other end of the side of the coin, you've got Scully, who's sort of the, your standard, respectable American, a single woman. But
she's not a misfit like Mulder is, though.
Right.
You know, but she's more the skeptic. She's more the voice of caution and reason in there. But that's one of the reasons I like the episode Beyond the Sea, where her father dies, and his favorite song was Beyond the Sea, and they play that at his funeral, and then they go, Brad Dourif, very good actor, plays this guy who claims that he can communicate with the dead. And Mulder thinks it's all just a scam.
Yeah.
And he gives him a test, and he botches it badly. But as she's walking away, he starts, this scene gave me goosebumps as I was watching it. He starts singing Beyond the Sea.
Uh-huh.
It's like she's listening to that. It's like, how could he know that?
Her father's
at her father's funeral.
Right.
And then it's her father in the prison uniform looking at her. That was genius.
Yeah.
That was one of their very best episodes. And I don't want to give away too much about it, but just say, this is one you got to see. And it's like, it's like, episodes of Space 1999. It's like there were a few episodes that it's like, you should check out. But there's none I can say, you got to see this one.
The majority of seasons 1 through 4, I would almost venture to say, they are just, each one is almost a perfectly, flawless gem. Every one has something redeeming.
One of the things I thought that was interesting about Little Green Men, okay? The opening on that I thought was very good.
We wanted to believe. We wanted to call out. On August 20th and September 5th, 1977, 2 spacecraft were launched from the Kennedy Space Flight Center, Florida. They were called Voyager. Each one carries a message.
I send greetings on behalf of the people of our planet. We step out of our solar system into the universe seeking only
A gold-plated
peace,
record depicting images, music, and sounds of our planet, arranged so that it may be understood if ever intercepted by a technologically mature extraterrestrial civilization.
Hello from the children of planet Earth.
13 years after its launch, Voyager 1 passed the orbital plane of Neptune and essentially left our solar system. Within that time, there were no further messages sent, nor are any planned. We wanted to listen. On October 12, 1992, NASA initiated the High-Resolution Microwave Survey, a decade-long search by radio telescopes scanning 10 million frequencies for any transmission by extraterrestrial intelligence. Less than 1 year later, first-term Nevada Senator Richard Bryan successfully championed an amendment which terminated the project. I wanted to believe, but the tools have been taken away. The X-Files have been shut down. They closed our eyes. Our voices have been silenced. Our ears now deaf to the realms of extreme possibilities.
And the thing was, the rest of the episode basically worked. But the opening, as I watched that, I was like, wow, this is done with real skill.
Yeah.
This was done very well.
Remind us what happens in Little Green Men.
Well, I don't want to give away too much about it, but it deals with the whole Voyager thing where we send a message out into outer space, and then we SETI had this antenna in Puerto Rico that was listening if someone was going to contact us back.
Right. This is the WOW signal.
And they turned it off after a year because they said, there's no one out there.
Yeah.
And that actually did happen. It was on for a year, then they're like, this is a waste of money.
Oh, they scanned about this much sky.
yeah. And what happened was they turned it off. And then in the episode, someone sends back the message from Voyager right back to us.
Right.
And that triggers the whole rest of the events. I don't want to give away too much of it, but that was one of the ones that I think you should definitely check out. And I want to say this just real quick.
Mulder ends up going to the SETI facility, right? Yeah, that's a
Puerto Rico,
amazing one.
I did want to say this. This is one of the, this is why I envy young people, because you see shows that have been made like the X-Files, and it's documented. You can look up what the really good episodes are, so you can just go and watch
true.
those.
You can skip some of
and
the-
skip the rest of it.
Skip the slow ones, yeah.
Because it's like the same is true with the Twilight Zone, the Outer Limits. It's documented the really good episodes, even the new Twilight Zone. You know,
Yeah.
it had some really good ones,
They get
and you
their-
can just
their bad
skip
weeks.
all the bad stuff. You know, and most of it is weak. Most of it is bad, but there are a few that shined. And it's like it's like the people for the Star Wars films. It's like there's only 3 Star Wars films I want to show my kids.
Yep.
And that's the first one, The Empire Strikes Back, and I know I'm going to take a lot of heat from this from you and the rest of the planet, The Phantom Menace, which I love.
Not Jedi?
No,
I would only show Jedi just to complete the
yeah, just
trilogy.
to complete the trilogy.
But I don't. It's like you said. It's a dumb. The answers are stupid.
Stupid, yeah.
You
We
know.
have answers, but they're stupid answers.
Yeah.
But the thing is I liked Anakin Skywalker's character, and I liked the idea of a little kid being empowered to change the course of history. You know, and to me that was an interesting idea. And as a little kid, he has to make adult decisions, tough
Yeah.
decisions, and he makes the right ones. You know, and he becomes a big hero in the story. And I was like, "Go, Anakin!"
Well, that was certainly the better of the second trilogy. I think that
Well,
one.
of the early films, I thought that was the only one that I really loved. You know, I didn't like Jedi. I Attack of the Clones. You have to understand something, Josh. I'm not as hard on Attack of the Clones and the other Star Wars films as you are, because I'm a sucker for science fiction movies. You know, I kind of am easier on them than most people because I love science
Give
fiction.
it a pass a little bit.
I give a little more leeway than most people will, but from an artistic standpoint, yeah, Attack of the
Yeah.
Clones, it was pretty weak.
Well, I'll give you- it's harder to make science fiction and to make good science fiction harder still.
well,
to
the
make
problem-
great
the prob-
science fiction is almost unheard of.
Well, the problem with the Star Wars thing is that they pretty much did what worked earlier, and now they're just they're cloning
Yeah.
it, they're rehashing
That's
it, and it just
cynical.
doesn't work anymore.
Attack of the Clones was a very aptly named.
I was a clone.
That's exactly it. Let's do a formula of what worked in the past, and let's basically just replicate that.
Yeah, again and
We'll
again and
give
again.
it the Star Wars stamp, and then. But we don't want to digress too much. So we know
Yeah.
we're talking about a show that really
Yeah,
did work.
Yeah, let's get back on the X-Files. Yeah.
So the ideas were good enough to make this thing go 9 seasons. Is
Yeah.
Is that right? 9?
Yeah, it was 9, but the last 2, I think we both agree, were pretty weak. Patrick, the guy who played the T-1000, he came in, but
Right.
they really, Gillian Anderson and him, they just didn't really work. You know, there wasn't that tension there.
And then they had Annabeth Gish sort of playing the other Scully. So they had the new couple that was supposed to be displacing the old, but they kept bringing in the old actors. They'd come in cameos, and it was all very.
It just.
It smacked of desperation to keep a show going when it really should have.
You know, there's a saying in the industry that you want to stop when you're on top. You want to stop while you're still strong.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that with the X-Files, and it's
Or
really
like
kind of too bad
with
because the last
like,
2 seasons were a joke.
BBC, you know, they go in, they plan, we're going to do this many seasons, and we're going to have an ending, and it's going to be an excellent ending that will be satisfying, but it will be over.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, or if there's such an outcry that we need one more series, then we'll bring out one more after. But American shows, it's money driven, and so if the dollars are there and they think they can squeeze another season out of it, however terrible and cynical it might be.
Because there's so many people that are desperate
Yeah.
for it, you know, because they have so many fans who will
And-
still sit through it, even though it's terrible now.
At that point, X-Files was still just running on like hope and adrenaline fumes or something. But,
It was basically running on empty. Boy,
and I would tune in from time to time in the last 3 years, but it was no longer the event that a group of us all looked forward to. We didn't get together to make popcorn and watch the thing.
No.
And we'd try to find things to like, and you just kind of were left wishing for the old
Yeah.
setup, I think.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about another episode, Humbug.
Sure.
You saw that one, right? About
Yep.
the circus freaks?
Yes, with the lizard, the crocodile man.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. You know, I thought this actually had something to say because the people who do the circus thing, who are the circus freaks, they're real people.
Yeah.
They have a sense of humor. They have wives. They have kids. You know, they relax, and it showed that side of them. And I thought that
The
was interesting.
sideshow freaks kind of.
Sideshow freaks, how they're actually real people, just like the rest of us.
So the premise is somebody's murdering sideshow Carnies.
Yeah, and they think it's one of the people in the sideshow that's doing it, so they're trying to investigate that. But my favorite scene in there was the scene where Mulder's talking with this guy who's a midget, and he's going under Gillian Anderson's room to make some repairs, and he's thinking he's being a peeping Tom. And I love the scene where he says to her, he says, "It might surprise you, but many women find my features to be very attractive. I have no problem, getting women. Many women want me."
Yeah.
And Mulder says in like this homoerotic, smart-ass tone, "Not just women." And the guy gets nervous because he's wondering if he's serious,
Yeah.
And it's like this is. You don't usually get to see Mulder make jokes, but there's like this homoerotic midget fantasy side of his personality.
Oh, yeah.
Smart-ass side of his personality coming out. I like that moment in it, and I like those little touches in there.
The Mulder character had a lot of wit, and you had that came out a lot with the Lone Gunman. Remember the friends
guys,
that he had, and he would, the one guy was sort of classically homely, and Mulder would always greet him with "Hi, handsome."
I like those guys. They really were misfits. They were kind of beautiful losers. But I really felt there should have been a scene in there where, like, their mother comes up to all of them in the attic and says, "How about a conspiracy to get a job?"
Get your ass out of the basement.
How about a conspiracy to help pay the rent? How come I don't ever hear about that conspiracy?
Right. You ever screaming from upstairs like, "It's time for your supper"? "Not now, Mom. We're unraveling a conspiracy."
I really felt that scene should have been in there somewhere.
So those guys were very much like a love letter from
They were beautiful losers.
Carter's
basically.
past, and they tie in with the JFK assassination,
Yeah.
Watergate, and
Yeah, they tried running The Lone Gunman as its own show. It
That's
just
right.
it just did like just a few short episodes. They canceled it. Just didn't have the following.
well, it was okay to me because I was a fan, but it's that those actors. There was no star power that you were going to pin the show on, unfortunately. So they had to rely on guest stars, and I don't think that didn't go too well for me.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's a hit or miss process, and that was the thing about the X-Files. It all came together right. It all just clicked. It all just worked. And I got to tell you this. I think if you had different actors playing Mulder and Scully, I think a lot of really good actors couldn't have pulled this off. They wouldn't have had that dynamic, that energy between them.
At the time, they were relatively unknown.
They
Especially
were
Anderson.
unknown.
Yeah, they were unknown.
Not relatively unknown.
I mean, now
they're huge.
McCovney's all over cable and Anderson's all over BBC or something.
Yeah.
But then they were nobody, and I think that added to the credibility.
Yeah, because you saw them as the people who the characters are playing rather than as big stars playing these people. And that made it work, kind of like Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford playing the 3 Star Wars characters.
Sure.
You saw them as the characters they wanted you to see them as.
Right.
They were unknowns at the time.
Whereas now we can't look at Harrison Ford without thinking about perhaps
Indiana
Indiana
Jones.
Jones or Han Solo.
Or even Deckard from Blade Runner.
True.
People have said he's not going to be remembered as Han Solo. He's going to be remembered as Rick Deckard from Blade Runner. That'll be the part he will be most remembered for.
I think so. That's the movie that's going to be. Well, I'd like to
It's
put
the most
it.
defining one.
Empire Strikes Back, for me, is in the same category, but it's not the same type of movie.
Yeah. But I wanted to talk about another episode I really loved, what was it called? Into Darkness?
Darkness Falls,
Darkness Falls, yeah. And
which refers to the little northwestern town that they go to, which most of the show is set in northwestern towns anyway, because they were shooting in Vancouver for about 90% of it. But and again, the side joke is like how they were able to make Vancouver look like
Los Angeles.
100 other countries in Los Angeles. But go ahead, Darkness Falls.
Well, I thought this was an interesting idea because there are real issues in this. And this is a good sci-fi idea, as well as a good story idea. The fact that these loggers are opening up these logs and they accidentally unleash a super insect that had been sitting dormant for millions of years.
An ancient life form.
An ancient life form that is almost unstoppable. And it's just wiping out and killing everything it comes in contact with. And what happens is that they're able to get control of this thing. They find out about it early enough, and they bring in pesticides, an entire team of people, to wipe this thing out before it gets loose and spreads to the entire planet and wipes everyone out. This is a good sci-fi idea. This is a good story idea.
Yep.
And the ending scene in there was just so powerful, where he's like, well, he's talking to the guys who are in charge of this mission. And he says to him, look, if this thing gets loose, we're all dead. You know, and the guy says to him, failure is not an option, Mr. Mulder. You know, we're not going to allow that to happen. We're 100% determined. And this is interesting because
was that one of the ones where one of the hidden masters rolls in at the end? One of the Majestic 12 or whatever these guys?
Maybe. I don't remember that part of it, but that ending scene was really quite powerful. You know, it was riveting. It was memorable. It's like etched in your brain for the rest of your life. It's like, how many shows out there now can we say that about it? Can you think of one scene in Fringe that is just etched in your brain like that?
Only because of John Noble. He's
I'm talking about the writing. I'm talking about the writing.
No.
But this is one definitely to check out. And I don't want to give away too much about it. But it's interesting to me also about that episode When Darkness Falls. You've got like this hippie character, and you've got like this logger character, and they represent two very different dynamics. It's like I was kind of on the side of the hippie guy, but it's like the criticisms of the hippie by the logger. It's like, yeah, he's got some good points too. It's like I was kind of, you know, it's like I was kind of for and against both of them.
Yeah, they managed to bring in the logging controversy as well.
Yeah. That was another interesting thing of it. And it's interesting to me because they'll bring in like fringe type of characters, like these fanatical animal rights people, and bring them in and show how these people think and what they're like, and make them interesting, riveting characters, you know, and make it work.
Yeah.
You know, that's another thing the show did well. And basically, you know, I want to say again, you know, hey, the studios, the money men, the people making the decisions, be willing to take some risks. Be willing to fall on your faces. You know, that's the only way you'll come up with really good shows. And there's money in it for you. You can put it on syndication, heaven forever. But it's only going to happen if you're willing to take those risks. It's like what Stanley Kubrick said. Figure out whatever the convention is and then go 180 degrees the opposite direction.
Seems like another modern miracle that this show got made. I guess it was what you said. It was that Fox was so new, they were taking a risk, but this wouldn't have happened on any of the big networks.
No, ABC, NBC, CBS, they would have.
What do you call it? They would have diluted it down so badly that it wouldn't have had any of these.
Any real impact at all. Yeah, that's the sad part of it. But I mean, the other reason it worked was because there was just this dynamic between your two stars that carried it. You know, it really, the two of them. You know, I think an actor like Gary Oldman and Gwyneth Paltrow, both of them phenomenal actors. I take nothing away from them.
Okay.
But I just don't think they would have had that tension that would have made it near as interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think they could have pulled it off as well. Even though they're much more skilled actors, don't get me wrong.
Right.
Yeah, not that Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny are bums. They're good actors.
Sure.
They really are, but they're not on their level.
No.
For acting skill. But at the
These
same
are TV
time,
actors.
What?
Yeah, they're TV actors.
No, but they're good TV actors.
Yeah.
You know, they're first-rate actors, is what I'm saying. But there's a difference between being a first-rate actor and being a phenomenal actor. You know, but even with phenomenal actors, you know, it's not just about being good by yourself. It's also playing off your opponent and having a dynamic between the two of you and making that work. And that doesn't always happen, even with really strong actors.
There was always some crisp, racy banter between the two of them that really worked well.
You know, Marlon Brando was going to play the part of either Sundance or Butch Cassidy, the Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. They're going to have Paul Newman play the other part. And I gotta tell you right now, you know, even as good as Brando is, they just wouldn't have had the dynamic to make that work, because Brando, he was such a big star. It's like, you know, I gotta be the, you know, I gotta dominate this. It wasn't about the movie worked because they didn't. There wasn't one actor that dominated the scenes.
Yeah, yeah.
They were buddies.
It was Mr. Sundance.
Robert Redford.
Right.
You know, it's interesting because Redford was actually, he's considered in the industry to be a second-rate actor. Not a bad actor, but an actor of limited range. You know,
Yeah, I can see that.
but still qualified to do the parts that he did, and he pulled them off.
Yeah.
Redford can hold his head up high. He's a good actor. He's a good man.
But your point is that he...
The scene wouldn't have worked because Brando, it's like he can't. He's got to dominate the scene. You know, it's like in order for that to work, these guys were buddies. They were tight. It had to be about both of them. Mm-hmm. It couldn't be about one of them.
Yeah, good point. It's
a dynamic between two actors.
An ensemble, or at least
a duet.
A duet.
Yeah, it's a duet, and the X-Files was a duet the same way Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was a duet.
And what's so good about it's hard to separate Anderson and Duchovny from Mulder and Scully sometimes, and they become sort of like the two halves of, let's say, the American psyche. Like you have the conservative thinking and the liberal thinking, or you have at least the skeptic and the believer. And the show works because, you know, when the average person is out there solving mysteries from day to day, you have the two halves of your brain that are simultaneously doubting and perhaps believing. So basically, the characters of the show are speaking for the audience.
For the person who has to work through these problems.
Yeah, and they're taking you through the whole journey.
A certain amount of healthy skepticism, but also with a certain amount of creative imagination to fill in the gaps.
Yes.
Because sometimes, in order to solve a problem or to come up with an answer, you have to transcend logic and just go with your gut.
And there's so many parts of the show that prove where skepticism just simply is not appropriate.
No.
Once the overwhelming evidence has piled up in your face, it's time for a different approach.
Well, you know, one thing I will say about this, you know, they listed the best episodes of The X-Files. I'll just list the names without a couple of them real quick without listing the plot. Drive, Triangle, Bad Blood, Never Again, Joseph Chung from Outer Space, Die Hand, Vertez, Venal, Field Trip, Small Potatoes, The Postmortem Prothesis, Home, Pusher, Clyde Barker Buckman's Final Repose, Paperclip. Yes. You know, it's interesting because I was going through, there was like 30 episodes that they strongly recommended.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
all of those.
You know, it's interesting to me because it's like I look at the original Star Trek, the TV series. It's like there's 10 episodes I could strongly recommend.
Yeah, if you only had 10 on your island, you'd do okay.
Yeah. But it's like there's like about 10 I could strongly recommend, and that's it. You know? It's like with the X-Files, it's like 30. You know, even though it's a 9-season show, 9 years, that's still pretty good.
What's the ratio there, I wonder? So for Star Trek, it'd be about a third, would be less than a third.
Well, the thing is it's probably about the same ratio, but the thing was, you know, Leonard Nimoy and the rest of the people, they said after the third season we were done.
Yeah.
We'd run out of material.
Or even after the second season, right?
Yeah. But we still stretched it to the third anyway.
Right. But we had more hair.
Yeah. But you want to get to the 3 seasons because then you can be in syndication heaven forever. You got enough episodes to live in syndication heaven.
Yes.
You know, that's why the 3 and you're done. You know?
That gets you between 60 and 70 episodes.
Yeah, enough to be in syndication.
I see.
But the thing is for the X-Files, it's like they had material running for 9 years. Now understand the last 2 years were a joke. They were
so
terrible.
they may have close to about 200
they
episodes.
They basically had 7 years of good material.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a huge accomplishment, you know.
And this, you know, about 10% of those were actually a continuing storyline that took you from the threads set up with the pilot and took you all the way to the very last episodes of the show. Mm-hmm. So there was that serial for those diehard fans that were sort of following a thread from very first episode 1. You could follow that all the way to the end of the show if you could put up with some of these other non-canon episodes.
Yeah. Yeah, but the thing was whenever they do something, this is the problem they have. Okay, do we go with a proven formula that we know works?
Yeah.
That we beat to death to where people are bored to tears.
That certainly happened in the last 2 seasons.
Or do we do something do we take big risks and risk losing the audience entirely? You know, this was an interesting thing. Let me give you an example. Zardoz, when it was made. Film took huge risks. William Goldman, when he saw it, and Oliver Stone actually defended the film. And they stood alone defending it. Stone actually took all of his screenplays that he wrote up to that point, picked them up, threw them in the trash. Everything he'd wrote at that point.
Oliver Stone?
Oliver Stone.
That's a good story.
The director. He was a young screenwriter at that time, considered the best young rising screenwriter. And he said,
Wrote JFK, I think, which sort of ties in with the X-Files.
Yeah, but the thing was, Stone said, he said the main problem with this film is it's just too far ahead of the learning curve. He said, you've got a main character who's a bad guy, who's a villain. A bad man in a bad world dealing with a bad system. He said this is so more advanced than anything I've written, anything I've seen. He's like, I am starting all over. And if you look at the footprint of what he did after that, you know, you look at Salvador, where you have a very flawed hero in a very corrupt, rotten system, but he's less bad than the other evil that's out there.
Maybe natural.
But that was a recurring theme.
Natural-born killers or something.
Natural-born killers. Yeah, that was let's make the villain the main character. Let's make it his story.
Yeah.
This is much more interesting. Or U-Turn's another example of that, where Sean Penn plays this two-bit criminal who just keeps getting himself into deeper and deeper trouble.
I've seen that one too. I didn't know that was Stone.
Yeah, that was Oliver Stone. But the thing is in order to do great work, you have to take great risks. There's no way around it, and I just don't see that happening. And I want to talk about one of the problems where, you know, this is a reflection of what's wrong with our society as a whole. Our technology is making us dumber because, you know, you think technology would make us smarter, but it's actually making us dumber because we're relying on our technology to do our thinking. You know, before, when you had to do the math yourself by hand, you had to understand how the mathematics works.
Right.
You know, you can just plug the numbers in without understanding the math itself. So you can't check your equation because you don't understand. All you know is how to plug the numbers into the calculator. So it's making it easier for us, and making it easier for us is making us dumber as a people. And, you know, and some people argue like idiocracy, that dumb people can read faster than smart people. Oh my God! In 500 years, where are we going to be? The dumb gene's going to take over the whole planet. I mean, another problem with our society is the fact that we squash men like Tucker. You ever saw the movie Tucker? And we squash men like Dalton Trumbo, who was a blacklisted writer during the McCarthy era. Men are pushed down wrongly who haven't done anything wrong. You know, our best and brightest are being ruined and destroyed. Well, men like George W. Bush are artificially being pushed to the top.
Okay.
You know, and if this isn't a formula for disaster, I don't know what is.
That's true.
You know, it's interesting because in Spartan times, the children had to go through trials. They had to go through training that was rough. I mean, it was rough as combat is. And the training was so rough that if you weren't smart enough and tough enough to make it through, you died during the training. There were a lot of kids that were casualties of the training.
Yeah.
But the thing was, you know what, George W. Bush wasn't going to make it through. He had to become a leader.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So
just give him a pass.
What?
Well, he had a free pass.
Well.
Yeah. Well, we won't get into George Bush's career, but
what career? He cheated his way through college and then to the presidency.
So the X-Files got comfortable enough where it was able to take a lot of risks, and some of those shows, some of those episodes became very nonlinear, very unconventional, and
like Field Trip?
Really had some amazing results.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about Field Trip? I was going to touch on Jose Chung too. I know you haven't seen it, but I wanted to sort of give the outline of it.
You talk about, let's go with Jose Chung.
So in Jose Chung, in season 3, they were able to really jump off the cliff with some amazingly, as I said, nonlinear and sort of unconventional setups. In this one, it's not told from the perspective of Scully or Mulder. There's a third person, this Jose Chung. He's a pulp science fiction writer, sort of loosely modeled after like Ron Hubbard, or he's sort of a hack who he can spin a good yarn, but he steals his ideas from everywhere, and ultimately his books are never going to be great or something. So
He's one of these guys who's just fringe enough to make a little money, but not really ever going to make it big.
and it ends up, I think he
Kind of a snake oil salesman.
exactly, and he catches wind of this story about an alien body that was discovered by a local kid, and then it was taken away by the Air Force. And so he goes to investigate this, and that's how it starts. And it ends up the X-Files' own version of Rashomon, the classic Japanese cinema, where it's told from many different vantage points. So you have other characters, as Jose Chung interviews them, they're recounting the same story, I think 3 or 4 different times, and each time it's a little different. And the pictures that they give of Mulder and Scully as they describe them, and then Anderson and Duchovny act out these depictions, it is absolutely hilarious, the way that they
characterize themselves. You know, that makes it interesting.
But one of the fun things is it opens up with we think someone has been abducted, a teenager has been abducted aboard an alien craft, and he looks over, in the next cell next to him, there's a gray alien chain smoking cigarettes saying, "This is just a dream, this is just a dream." And just in time for a giant ogre titan to walk into the scene. And so all ideas of reality are turned on their head. And also you have a bizarre cameo by Jesse Ventura and Alex Trebek, the Jeopardy
host.
And they come in as Men in Black to basically rough up this person, the kid who's found the body.
This is taking risks.
And you have Jesse Ventura saying, you know, the planet Venus is more often mistaken for an alien craft than any other celestial object, and what you saw was the planet Venus. And hilarity ensues, but it is the most genius. For me, that is the high mark, high water X-Files episode. I love it. Maybe second to the pilot. So.
Yeah, I want to talk also about the problem in the industry for a moment of reverse engineering good works.
Okay.
And what they end up doing
We were just talking about Star Trek today, if you want to,
Yeah, but all of it, Star Wars, Star Trek, you know, the Planet of the Apes, what they do is they'll look at what worked in the past, and they'll try to basically carbon copy that, but the novelty of it's gone for one thing.
Even worse, they pull out the sort of the threads. So in Planet of the Apes, there were shocks.
Yeah.
So we need shocks.
Yeah.
And there was jarring music, so we need jarring music. And there was a mutant, so we need
a mutant. Yeah, but there was. But the thing was there was a compelling story that had something to say that we could learn from. Mm-hmm. You know, the heart, the integrity of it wasn't there.
No.
But just kind of the beats of it.
So the trappings are there.
It's kind of like, a bad ripoff of a radio design. Like back in the 60s, the Japanese used to make really bad radios and TVs. and it is kind of like that. It's like a poor version of what had been done before.
Right.
And that's what I see going on. But the thing was when Dan O'Bannon wrote Alien, he wasn't going out there saying, I'm going to look at what's been done before and worked. I'm going to look at the entire universe.
Yeah.
Like Albert Einstein looking out at the universe and saying, okay, what do I see out there that's interesting?
Uh-huh.
And then he would say, okay, I see that predators strengthen the herd. That was his inspiration for Alien. And he said, okay, the human race has gotten to the top of the food chain. So now dumb people, get to live to be ripe old age and get to make more dumb people. He's concluding this. But what if on a spaceship we finally come across something that's a lot scarier than we are, and our technology can't save us. We're no longer at the top of the food chain.
And if you think about that movie, they just make one mistake after another.
And as soon as they do, they're dead.
Yeah.
One after another, real quick, boom.
For example, don't go out there in the storm. What else? You can't come back because you're under quarantine.
Yeah, it's interesting. Tom Skerritt, who the part of Dallas was written for him, he read the script and he said to himself, "My character is a fool. He said, if that thing was attached to my own mother's face, I wouldn't let her back on the ship.
Yeah.
He is out of his mind. He's like, are you kidding me? Kane's dead. I'm leaving him. You know?
It's funny how they, well, we shouldn't talk about Alien too much, but it's funny how they play it because they make, for a second, you're down on Ripley for
being such a
sticking to the rules.
the rules and being
right.
such a bitch, yeah.
And then later, it's like,
You realize she was right. she
Maybe they
she
should've
made the
opened the
right
door.
call. And I think what was interesting to me in the script was Parker, who hates her guts, openly hates her guts, is actually backing her up on that decision.
Right.
Later, he's like, well, maybe she should have left him out. He hates Ripley.
you wouldn't have had the last hour of the movie.
He's like, it wasn't my idea to bring this thing on board. He actually agreed with her on that call, you know?
Well, we better get back to the X-Files.
But X-Files. But what I'm saying, my point is that Dan looked out in the universe and said, what do I find that's interesting? That would make a compelling, interesting story. And that was Alien.
And with X-Files,
But we don't see that. What we see is people looking at what worked in the past. How can we do it again? You know, but they're not adding the passion. They're not adding the heart. They're not adding the integrity. And they're not turning them into morality tales. For stories to have any real weight, they have to be morality tales. There has to be something we can learn from these.
perhaps that was the inevitable destiny of X-Files too, was that at the end of it, they're really just trying,
Rehashing
they're
what they
going
did
back
before.
to what goes on.
And they're playing it safe.
That's right.
And in playing it safe, they ended up being counterproductive. You know, and it was unfortunate. But that's, as they say, that's the way the ball bounces.
Okay, let's pause for just 1 second. What time is it? We're getting waved on here.
We got 5.
5 minutes? Okay. Could you just tell the guys out there 5 minutes? Yeah, they're knocking on the door here.
Okay. So, but the thing is we need to go back to that, and we need to go back to taking risks, and we need to look for innovators instead of imitators to step up to the plate and say, we're going to support these guys. We're going to give them the freedom and the leeway to do what they want. And let me give you another example of this. The youth division that came out of the of the movie Easy Rider, where they said, instead of fighting these independent filmmakers, let's bring them in, let's hire them, let's give them money to make a movie and give them the freedom to do it their way, and then we'll stand back and see what happens. And the results was they made 5 movies. 2 of them went on to be hits. And that was American Graffiti and Silent Running. You know? And they basically gave Doug Trumbull the freedom to do it his way.
These were these 5 movies for $100,000 each?
Well, no, the budget was originally started at $1 million.
Okay.
But the funny thing was, with Silent Running, Doug said to him, look, this is going to be a lot more than $1 million. I have a vision here. And they decided to, okay, we're going to give you, we're going to give you it. We're going to give you the money. But we're going to do it like a TV movie. You know, just 2 takes for each scene. And just the minimum of what you need. And, you know, he wanted to spend a couple $10,000 more on the special effects. And the studios won't let him. They're like, no.
Right.
This movie's a failed experiment, Doug.
Okay.
And
so
then
what you're talking about is art through adversity, and X-Files was able to benefit from perhaps that same thing. What we were saying earlier, though, is I don't personally know sort of what sort of struggles between the studio and Chris Carter, let's say.
Well, one of the things that X-Files had going for it was it didn't have, particularly when it started off with, these were tight budgets and tight schedules.
So you have some real economy of storytelling.
Yeah, so you had to go to the drama of the story, and you couldn't turn these into special effects vehicles. And that's what I see going on now. I mean, I look at James Gray. He's a director, a very good director, and he basically came out and said, Americans no longer know how to tell good stories anymore. He says, go to the movies, go to TV.
X-Files did.
He's talking about right now.
Yeah.
He says they suck. They're terrible.
But they had just enough time and money with the shows to have 1 or 2 little special effects in the X-Files, and that was all you get. And a lot of times it was just sort of right at the end where you'd get hit with some kind of like, the mystery is still...
Yeah, but it was just enough to whet your appetite, but it wasn't enough to go too far to where, as they say in sales, you're buying it back.
Right.
You know, it's like they went to where they needed to go, they nailed it, they got out.
Yeah.
You know, and they did it right.
It's funny because if you look at some of these props and stuff, they have photos of them online. It's like, they really weren't that good. Like the little aliens that they had in the container. If you look at them now, they're just kind of your imagination and the
but with
setting
shadows
and the lighting,
and only partially showing it, it does work because by only seeing half of it, it's like what Spielberg said. Because I didn't have the money to do Jaws right, I had to allude to things instead of showing them.
Yeah.
And as a result, I made a 10 times better movie.
Well, the show had another side to it that was, remember when Millennium branched off as sort of a parallel thing? So X-Files had the thing where after the movie Seven and things like that, it tried to find its own way into what you might call like the creepy territory where
creepy, dark.
Yeah, and then you had the episodes that were a lot more overt, like Home. You had these mutants that were very ugly, right on camera, right up in the camera, and they were performing these brutal murders more or less right in camera. Yeah. The show did kind of take a darker turn about halfway through, and I think, in my opinion, for the most part, that didn't work for them. And when they went back to their roots about supernatural, extraterrestrials, that sort of thing, and away from the monsters, that's to me when the show really shone. The show really shined.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, I really think that what we really need to do is just really go back and say we're going to look to young people who are lean and hungry, and we're going to give them the freedom to take the risks. We're going to look for people who are passionate, who have something to say, and we're going to give them the money, and then we're going to pull back and not try and control them. Because, as you know, one of the big weaknesses of all TV is that you can't have anything on there that offends the guy who's selling the cars or selling the soap or selling the towels.
We are always going to go back to sponsor at regular intervals. So yes,
you can't be too bold. But that's one of the interesting things about HBO, where they didn't have sponsors, where they had more freedom, and as a result, I think they made some more interesting shows like The Sopranos and stuff like that. Maybe
they don't have a commercial break. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, it's not just the commercial break, but it's also the sponsor break. I don't have the sponsor breathing down their neck.
It might also be, for another time, it might be an interesting conversation of why the X-Files movies just didn't quite make it.
Just quite make it.
They got two feature-length movies, about 10 years apart.
Yeah.
And they're both really quite bad. For different reasons.
Yeah.
The first one is arguably maybe a little more likable.
The first one, it was like Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. It rose to the level of mediocrity.
Yeah, it feels like X-Files.
Yeah, it basically rose to the level of mediocrity.
The second one...
It was good, but not that good. It was just kind of okay,
The other one was like, this is CSI or something. This isn't X-Files.
It was just stupid. And the thing of it was they were playing it safe. There was no spark there. There was no risk there.
Right. Although they do finally, Mulder and Scully get together, but they sort of just dump them into bed without any ceremony, and they wake up together and I guess they got together.
Yeah, it's like, but that was a cheap trick.
Yeah.
To draw the audience in. Okay, well, we got to wrap it up. Last thought, Josh?
Well, the X-Files is a classic script, and hopefully you will answer Tyler's challenge.
I'd like to quote Gene Roddenberry here when they were putting Star Trek: The Motion Picture together. It's a crazy business, And he said, we got a start date, but we don't have a script. Well, what the hell? Most people have a script and no start date. I mean, it's a crazy business, And let's just cross our fingers and let's remember that Poe and Twain, they were about the same time, and then there was several decades where we didn't have any great writers, but they got to be out there somewhere waiting to rise up. Let's hope and pray.
In the meantime, almost all the seasons of X-Files appear to be at the public library, so the audience who has not seen them should go out and enjoy the 100-some-odd excellent episode of X-Files. I say it's about half that are really quite good. So.
Okay, I think that's the final word.
Thanks very much. We'll see you next time.